Take one.
Hi, I'm Noah Preminger, and this is Jazz Language, a podcast that gives an inside look into the music industry.
Let's cut.
Ken, us Boston guys are taking New York by storm.
Here we are. Here we are.
Thanks for coming down with me to do this.
My pleasure.
There's a lot of places I feel like we could start because you are one of these people that does everything everywhere. Just like an absolute brilliant person. You have your feet like in every project.
You're very kind.
Let's start with how we met.
Okay.
I posted something back in the day about a lack of community in Boston.
Yeah.
In
the jazz community.
In the jazz community.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like went jazz viral.
Yeah.
And you commented or took notice that of the things I was saying.
Yeah.
Not really places for people to hang. Mm-hmm. Just no community, period.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I noticed your post. I happened to fall on it. I happened to see it. And you made good points. You were kind of, a little harsh, I would say, which is good in a way. And I thought, there's a good point. I reached out to you. I said, what can we do? Let's see if we can work together.
Right.
In my role as president of this organization, this advocacy organization called JazzBoston, jazzboston.org. We've been around for about 20 years. We have about 4,700 members, people, musicians, audiences, venues, media. So it was a reasonable place to start and to see what we could do together to make things better. And so a number of years later, I'm not sure what transpired in the interim. Maybe it was COVID. I'm not sure.
Just a little thing.
There was a thing. There was this thing. But you ended up joining our board, JazzBoston board, and you're now doing things to address that issue, specifically twice monthly jazz jams, but other things as well. So it's great. It's a good way that story could develop.
We both have had the good fortune to be able to move around the world, mm-hmm. playing music and kind of checking out different cultures and communities around
mm-hmm.
the world.
Mm-hmm.
I had moved back from New York City to Boston, and just one thing I always felt that New York had that nowhere else has
mm-hmm.
is a place to hang out.
Yeah.
For all ages.
Yeah.
Whether it's people's living rooms mm-hmm. or like, basements playing sessions all the time, or clubs where people kind of can sneak in of all ages.
Right.
In New York, there's this thing where musicians go out and support other musicians.
Yeah.
And it doesn't tend to happen very much in other places, including Boston.
I think it's fair to say that New York is a pretty unique scene and a pretty amazing scene. And, I'm just down here for a few days. It's amazing to spend some time. I just happened to learn, just because I dropped into the place where it was happening, of a concert by Michael Sarian, trumpeter Michael Sarian, 2 nights ago, I think, at the National Art Club. Is that what it's called? Amazing. Just stuff happens. And
right.
It's not like that anywhere else, but Boston has a scene, and you and us and a lot of people are sort of continuing to try to make it better.
Right.
But it'll never be New York.
I think one of the reasons is it's a move in, move out city.
It's true.
Boston. You got students coming in for 4 years and then they leave. Yeah. Most of them.
Yeah.
And you have faculty who, a lot of them commute to Boston.
That's true.
It's also pretty spread out. So you have, you could have somebody maybe in New York living in Brooklyn or in Harlem, but, in 30 minutes you can take the train easily to a club or whatever.
It's true.
In Boston, you're kind of, it's suburb land.
Well, I'm gonna be the Boston proponent here in this conversation and say there are definitely areas that Boston's lacking, but I think there's also areas where Boston is unique and amazing. You have so many students in Boston who are really looking to hear interesting music. And you have so many students from a variety of places. So young people from all over the world, and that seeds not only the audiences, but the musicians and the collaborations that take place. And I think that's interesting. And I think certainly there's people from all over here in New York, but the gathering of so many young people, so many college-age people, they are coming in and out, as you say, but they're in town for a while, and they're bringing in new ideas, new cultures, and it's, for me, has been a really amazing opportunity to play such a wide range of music from different cultures, from different attitudes, and I find there's a lot going on. So, I haven't ever spent time living in New York, so I don't have that comparison to make.
Right.
But I find it to be a really engaging and, in some ways, creatively challenging place, which is, I'm saying that in a positive way.
Don't get me wrong, I love Boston, which is why I live there.
Right.
I chose it as my home the past 13, 14 years because it's a beautiful place. Yeah. And there's a lot of amazing musicians, and there are venues. Sometimes you just need to be creative.
You do need to be creative, yeah. And I think that, in a broader sense, I think doing creative music, you need to be creative in all kinds of aspects of your creativity. Finding gigs, you have to be creative. Playing creative music, you need to be creative if you're trying to do something a little bit new, a little bit different. So,
segueing into creative music. So you have a new record that's coming out soon, one of your projects. Your projects are very diverse.
They are.
You have records that are projects that are more like free improvisational based. You have records that are more groove based.
Yeah,
that means that you've researched different styles of music over the years, and you've made the choice to pursue like a particular style.
I'm not sure that I've chosen to pursue anything in particular. What I feel very lucky about is that opportunities come along, and I've been, I would say, fortunate to have been trained to the point that I can engage in different approaches to making creative music. I can have a go at free improv. I have a go at loop-based improv, electroacoustic kind of improv, which is the album you mentioned, which is now out, actually. It's,
nice.
It's a project called B.Mez, with the dot being the period, B.Mez. It's an offshoot of the group Birdsongs of the Mesozoic, a group, a compositionally based group that I played with for many years.
Same members?
Mostly the same members, not entirely. So 3 of the 4 from Birdsongs have formed this loop-based electroacoustic project, B.Mez. We did a couple of residencies for over years at a venue in Cambridge, and then went and recorded, and we were joined by Roger Miller, who was one of the founders of Birdsongs of the Mesozoic, and put out this album. It's called Under Circuitous Skies. It's out on Cuneiform Records, the label that also put out Birdsongs of the Mesozoic material for many years, and also has put out my Revolutionary Snake Ensemble material. So I feel like that's an opportunity. I've played with an Armenian-American group. I have my own group, Revolutionary Snake Ensemble. I put out a number of solo albums, which are mostly layered alto saxophone. These are opportunities that I'm super grateful for, that are interesting to me. I mean, that's what I'm looking for, is things that are interesting, new, creative, maybe breaking just a tiny bit, breaking new ground in some little tiny way.
I think you and I are similar. I think that we like to pursue, like we find inspiration and fun in taking a project from its infancy and to its completion.
Yeah.
And, personally, I don't feel like I need to tour it. The anxiety and the stress of trying to book gigs, for me, is often just not worth my time or energy.
Yeah.
But for me, creating a project, like my idea, and then forming it and conceptualizing that ensemble from the start to the finish, and the recording process, picking the band members, the whole thing is, I love it much more than standing on stage for 90 minutes and playing, personally. Well, and I think maybe you're similar.
I like both. I mean, I love performing. I love and I would say I'm a little less, well, no, I love recording too. I mean, I love going in the studio. But a project like Revolutionary Snake Ensemble, which is a group that I'll just explain a little bit about it. It's a group that's been around for quite a number of years now, has had a very fluid personnel over many years. The past 10 years, which is a short part of the lifespan of this group, the past 10 years, I've had the same membership. So that's been great. That's been amazing.
It's a Boston-based band.
It's a Boston-based band. It came out of a sort of a New Orleans second line vibe, and we've expanded it pretty quickly. We expanded it to include free improv and funk, and it's a fun band. And it's also, I think, a creative band. Not for me to say, but I think we're doing some creative work. We've gotten more into doing my original material, so the most recent album, which is called Serpentine, came out on Cuneiform Records in the fall, is mostly my original material. The previous one, I think, as well. So
that's the band that you graciously invited me to play with.
Yes, I did. Yes, and you graciously agreed.
It was fun.
It was fun.
That was for a particular event.
That was a sort of a Mardi Gras thing, because we are based in Mardi Gras tradition, New Orleans brass band tradition, which I could talk about forever as well.
Right.
But I think that group is very improvisational, not only in terms of soloing, but in terms of the arrangements. So I tend not to formalize the arrangements with the group. I give them a head chart, sometimes some harmonies written out, a couple of sections of the tune, and often who's soloing, when they're soloing, who's dropping out when, is all improvisational. Largely because I just can't remember an arrangement.
You mean so for like every piece, it's
pretty
sort
much
of...
every piece. Some of them, there's some formalism that we've developed over the years, and this is kind of how we do it. But most of the time, I'll just be calling different.
So you're sort of relying on the band's intuition as a whole, to get through the piece, and
both the band intuition, because I'm both directing and I'm also letting go. I think that's what a leader, at least what I do as a leader. I have my vision, I have my concept of what's going to work, but I also know these other members of the band, they're amazing musicians. I'm so fortunate to play with them, and they all have great vision. They're very creative, great players. If they come up with something in the middle of a performance or a recording session or whatever, it goes, and we've been playing together now with these particular people for about 10 years, so we kind of know each other, and we know what works and what doesn't.
Right.
And once in a while, somebody will do something, and I'll kind of wave them off or whatever, but not usually.
What's the Armenian project?
The Armenian project, which ran for years, it's not really active now, is called Musaner. It's led by a guy named Ara Sarkisian, amazing piano player and composer and arranger, and a lot of, that music often incorporates odd time signatures, and so I learned a lot from that. I learned my limitations rhythmically of soloing over, 13/8 kind of things. But, you get it eventually.
Is that music that you've spent time studying?
No, not really. I mean, I'm kind of a naive player. I did study, I studied at Berklee for 4 semesters. Played clarinet since I was 10. Didn't do improvisation until I got to college.
Right.
I was kind of a late...
You're from Jersey?
From New Jersey, yeah. I was born in Red Bank.
Right.
Count Basie and...
also from Red Bank?
Count Basie was born in Red Bank, yeah. Bruce Springsteen was very much in the area.
Okay.
So those are my two main...
So you went from Red Bank to Berklee for college?
No, I went from Red Bank up to Providence. I went to college first in Providence. I actually studied computer science at Brown.
You're a Browner.
Yeah, Browner.
Nice.
And I got into improvising there.
Cool.
When I was a kid, playing in the school band, high school band, there was a guy who played clarinet, this guy named Jackie Leroy, and he improvised, and it just baffled me. How does he, I had no clue.
Right.
So when I got to college, I started playing. I actually broke my front tooth. I couldn't play clarinet. Had to have a fake tooth put in, but in the meantime, I started playing flute. My sister played flute. I got a flute from her. And I started...
you were whistling through your front tooth?
No.
Like an actual flute?
Yeah, actual flute.
Okay.
So I started jamming with folk guys and blues guys and learning just simple, 1-4-5 kind of stuff.
That was where in Providence at Brown?
At Brown, yeah.
Okay.
Just playing in stairwells and stuff.
I told you I'm teaching at Brown this year.
I don't know if I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm subbing for Ed Tomasi.
Oh, great.
Who I think was there for a long time.
Ed's great. Yeah.
He took the year off, sabbatical kind of a thing. So I've been subbing at Brown, and the students are deep.
Yeah.
And there's another thing there. It just feels like culturally there's like an appreciation for music that doesn't exist at other places.
Well, one of the unique things about Providence is there's this the Rhode Island School of Design is there. Mm-hmm. And so there's this merging of cultures between these freaky art students and these kind of, I don't know, whatever, Brown students. And it really serves the community well. And then there's a whole community. I mean, there's a community in Providence that has developed and is creative,
right,
in many ways. So it's a very cool area.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I started learning how to improvise, just stupid, easy stuff, without really knowing much theory. I mean, one time somebody showed me the diatonic triad concept of the analysis of major scale, major diatonic harmony, and I'm like, that's what's going on. I had no idea, right? And so I did that for a while. I did work. I worked in the computer area for a little while. And some guy, great bass player named Bill DeMarco, who was also doing computer work where I worked, said, you should go up and study with Joe Viola up in Boston. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Called up Joe Viola. He said, sure, come on up once a week. Take private lessons with me. I wasn't enrolled or anything. I just went up and changed my life.
Wow.
Joe Viola, unbelievable teacher, player, and
classical stuff.
Well, he was a technical guy. I mean, he got me started on jazz tunes,
right?
Not just classical. One of the things he did early on, he said, you should go pick up a real book. They make E-flat real books, but you should get a concert real book and learn how to sight transpose.
Right.
So in some ways a minor thing, but
not at all.
I think it's an important thing, and I'm on a lifetime quest to get people to learn to sight transpose, because I just think it's a useful tool to put in your toolbox. I can go into a session and bring my soprano and my alto and my flute and switch off at will,
right,
by all reading concert parts.
So after Providence, you moved to Boston?
Yeah. So after studying with Joe for a while, I decided to take some time off from that work, from that computer work, right, and just come up to Boston. And
what decade was that?
The 70s, late 70s.
Man, so you got like prime Boston jazz club scene.
It was very good scene. I mean, I was very green going into Berklee. I mean, I'd studied with Joe. I'd learned a lot about how to handle a saxophone and how to handle a mouthpiece and a reed, and I learned about Emilio Lyons, and I learned some basic tools,
right,
but I wasn't a jazz player. I went into Berklee pretty green with my scores were modest, and Berklee basically taught me the tools I needed to be able to go out into the world and not be embarrassed in pretty much any situation. Didn't mean I was going to, wow anybody at that point, but I was going to learn on the job. If you can go into any situation and not be embarrassed, you're going to go into situations that are interesting,
right,
and you're going to learn by playing. So that's what I did.
So you mentioned like Zeppelin, but you must have been playing along with records at that time, learning different music, on clarinet, on saxophone.
No. I was just reading notes off a page for band.
So there weren't like records that you were listening to at the time and like playing along with them?
I was not playing along with Benny Goodman albums or anything.
Oh wow.
No.
Or rock records or funk records or anything like that.
It was a different thing. I mean, it
was like a different
my brain
education.
was, this is the playing part of my brain and this is the listening part of my brain. They weren't melded. I wasn't one of those people.
That feels not super typical, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know if it's typical or not. I certainly envy people who were doing that in an early age, as is more common, I think, now.
Right.
Like I said, in my school, there was one guy. That was it. You know, I didn't really know anybody else who was, I mean, guitarists maybe,
Right.
but not instrumentalists.
So at what point did you realize that there's more to being a musician than just playing the music?
At some point, somebody who had formed JazzBoston, a guy named Bob Young, who used to be a music writer for the Boston Herald, now lives out on the West Coast, formed this organization, JazzBoston. It was because previous organizations that were designed to do similar things, the Jazz Coalition, there were some other organizations, had run their course and no longer existed. And he thought, we need something in Boston to support the jazz community. And he formed JazzBoston. He got a couple of people to lead it, and he kind of was on the board. And a number of pretty amazing people were on the board early on, Donnell Fox, some other people. So at some point he asked me to get involved. So I got involved, and years later, then I was on the board, and then the leadership stepped down. Eric Jackson was on the board for a long time, and he proposed that I take on the leadership. So I did. And I feel like I'm involved in a couple of different community-based organizations.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that too.
Yeah, which are not all music-based, but community-based. And there was a point when I was working in the computer area when somebody who was working there said, hey, here's this tutoring organization in Cambridge, Tutoring Plus of Cambridge. I volunteer tutor, and you sent us around to all the employees. And I said, you know what? I'm doing a lot of things for myself, and I'm not really doing a lot of things, even if any things, for the community. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I should do this. I should take on this volunteer tutoring opportunity. And so I did, and I was a volunteer tutor for many years, in just math and reading and whatever. It was a very positive experience, and I had long-term relationships with some of the students I tutored. And then at some point I joined that board, and just continued to support them. I just was at one of their events. So
it's fulfilling.
It's fulfilling, and I think it's important for people to step up. Not everybody can. Different people's lives are full of different things, different obligations, different constraints. I happen to be able to do that. I had the bandwidth at that time to do that.
Right.
And so I think it's...
Well, on the JazzBoston board, people come in with ideas, and your go-to line is, well, put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
We need people to step up and do the thing.
Right.
And it sounds like you've done a fair share of that.
There's a lot that I can't do, but yeah, I've done some things. Yeah, I feel like... just to follow up on that my go-to line, one of the guys in Birdsongs, actually, Eric Lindgren, always used to say, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the follow-through that counts. And so a lot of people have ideas, like, something should happen. Like There's this T-shirt that says, why doesn't somebody do something about this?
Right.
And it's like, well, hello.
Well, I'm grateful that when I came to you with that idea of the jam session, or when we came up with that idea of the jam session, that you were willing to step up and do it.
Yeah.
I think that's hugely important. And I just sent you, there's another jam session starting in Boston. Like, these are the things that are so important to get people of all ages out playing, people who are stinkers who just pick it up for fun, and people who are serious, who want just a place to find a community and play or hang.
And the other thing that's valuable is when somebody who is just starting out, or maybe an intermediate player, has the opportunity to play with great players. That's huge. Right. That's not often the case. It's not often the case. A lot of times, jam sessions, you're at a certain level and you play with other people at your level. Right. And to be able to play with people at a higher level is great. That's my band is that. I get to play with people who are great players, and I learn a lot from them.
Yeah, the jam sessions thing's funny. A lot of people say, well, there should be jam sessions where it's where you get your ass handed to you. And I think there is something said for that, but I think your ass should get handed to you in a warm, welcoming environment. Yeah. Like, the ass handing should be from great players like yourself, who are sounding great on their instrument, and a young person who's starting out saying, damn, I want to be like that, or I want to be able to play with that sort of conviction or that, that foundation or that knowledge or whatever.
Well, I think, so there's another thing I've been doing now for 10 years, which is a project in Australia. And I was invited initially 10 years ago to be involved in a festival in Australia, in New South Wales. And they were going to bring over the Snake Ensemble, but they ended up not having enough money to bring the whole band. It's expensive to fly to Australia.
Yeah.
They just brought me over. And then the question is, well, what am I going to do? Play solo saxophone. So what I ended up, we had a big conversation. What I ended up doing is leading a pickup band. And the pickup band consists of all kinds of people in Australia, in the community, who want to play. So I brought in a couple of arrangements, some New Orleans stuff, some of my own compositions, and we had about 25 people the first year. And I said, look, I really need to have a solid rhythm section for this to work. So they brought over a tuba player from the West Coast. We had some good drummers over there. So we had a cool sort of second line-ish rhythm section. And I was very nervous that first year. Were people digging it? Were people engaged with? And they ended up inviting me back the next year. I figured I must have done okay. So over a few years, I really learned what I think I needed to know to do this. I bring in, as I say, my own compositions. I bring arrangements of Australian indigenous material, of Australian pop tunes like Beds Are Burning from the group Midnight Oil. I didn't realize it when it came out years ago, but it's a very deep and political song. And I learned how to bring together these players and how to get people who are a little cautious about their playing to feel good about whatever they did, to feel like they're making something new and creative and interesting, and they're maybe improvising as well when they didn't have any clue about how to do that. So my philosophy is, make good music. That's important. But make the process fun and make the participants feel good about what they're doing. So the cutting thing is not really part of that vibe. That vibe is inclusive, and I coach people. We now have 80 people in this group on a regular basis every year.
Right.
So it's a huge thing. When we first got that many people signed up to do it, I'm like, I'm going to have to assign section leaders, blah, blah, blah. I didn't. It just works.
And this is sort of goes hand in hand with the honk concept? It
does, yeah.
So what was your involvement with honk?
Well, honk was a festival that started in Boston, Somerville. It was started by a band that was very active politically. Activist street band is how they would characterize themselves.
Okay.
It was a band called the Second Line Social Aid and Pleasure Society Brass Band. They stole that name from the kind of concept in New Orleans. They are now called the Good Trouble Brass Band. They changed their name. And a couple of people from that band realized at some point that there are other bands around the country and around the world that are doing what they do to make the world a better place in some way, make their community better, make the broader world better, the country better. And they created this honk festival, Festival of Activist Street Bands. The first year, they invited the Snake Ensemble to play. We're kind of a fish out of water because that's not really what we are, but they invited us. I thought, this thing is so disorganized. This is going to be a total disaster. And in the end, it was a total amazing, beautiful experience.
Oh, wow.
The chaos was gorgeous. And so, which, can apply to music as well, right? Amazing
Exactly.
chaos that really transports you. And so I subsequently joined that band. I joined the organizing committee, and I was on the organizing committee for, 15 years, something like that. I stepped down recently.
That's a multi-city thing, right?
So, no, well, there are separate honk festivals in about 22, 23 cities around the world.
Okay.
They're all independent.
Oh.
So
The same concept.
It's a similar concept. We don't
People of different abilities can get together and go and blow, and There's a set repertoire that you kind of play through, right?
Well, there are different bands that do different things. So there are a lot of bands that do this kind of thing in different cities, Seattle and Austin and New York.
Okay.
And they form their own repertoire, and sometimes it's original material, sometimes but there is some commonality. But the people in Australia, in the city called Wollongong in New South Wales, they were looking to put together something, and they saw the honk concept, and then decided to put together a honk festival, Honk Oz. And so my thing happens at Honk Oz and also at another festival that's a week later, the Illawarra Folk Festival. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's been just a gift to get to know that community over 10 years.
Seems like it gives you great joy to do it.
It's great. It was very stressful at first, right, as anything can be.
Right.
But now I kind of know what I'm doing. And
was that was your introduction to Australia, or you had spent time there before?
No, it was my first. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a long flight.
Have you been to New Zealand?
Stopped in New Zealand a couple of times. We go and we
Right.
we spend a little more time and do some
I freaking
traveling.
love New Zealand.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of places I would like to revisit,
yeah.
but South Island, New Zealand is one of those that,
It's pretty.
It's magic.
Pretty majestic. Yeah.
yeah. This last section,
Oh, there's a last section.
there's a section.
Oh, there's a
It's
section.
the rapid fire
Oh,
section.
the rapid fire section. Am I allowed to pass on them if
You could, but everybody will know that you're passing.
I don't care?
Yeah, I know you don't. Okay, this is just a way for people to know Ken.
Oh, I see.
It's their
Yeah. Okay.
deeply revealing questions.
All right. Fair enough.
Would you rather live in a beach house, a ski villa, or a wine vineyard situation?
Well, I actually
You have all three.
I don't ski, so that doesn't interest me.
Okay.
You can hurt yourself to skiing. Do you know that?
You can.
I mean,
yeah.
people hurt themselves all the time. I'm not really into hurting
You're not-
myself.
Okay. Not
No.
a risk take.
Okay. But I've been fortunate. We now, in addition to having a small apartment in Cambridge, I have a house in
Beach.
Truro on Cape Cod, which is just
You're having.
lovely. I can practice at midnight.
Okay. Art Tatum or Thelonious Monk?
Monk.
Michael Brecker or Chris Potter?
I'm going to say Brecker, and one reason I'm going to say Brecker, I mean, of course, you're comparing.
Yeah, two
Why
amazing
even
saxophone
compare?
players.
I don't know. But when I was studying, I forget who I was studying with. And they handed me an exercise in fourths. This really great exercise that I loved, and it was a Brecker thing that he wrote out.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love Brecker.
Yeah.
I feel like the younger generations aren't really familiar with Brecker's playing.
Well, I'm a pretty naive player. My solo albums, I've done about 3 solo albums with this layered saxophone thing. Of course, everything you hear comes back out in some way. But I didn't do a lot of transcriptions. I mean, I practice Charlie Parker solos, all the time. But I'm kind of like a naive, what do they call those artists who just do something without really knowing what it is? A part of me is that. And I think there's a lot of negatives to that. There's a lot of negatives to not really studying your predecessors. And I'll admit it. I haven't really studied, I listen to Cannibal. I have listened to a lot of things, but studying, I'm not particularly knowledgeable. And that's not a good thing, but there's a positive side to it, which is that you do things that just come out of your head, right? That maybe...
It's an experimentative way of improvising and creating.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's sort of part of the fun in it.
It is. And what I'll say is, in terms of my writing, I'm not trained in composition, right? And so you're not breaking rules because you don't even know what the rules are. You know what I mean?
On one of these tunes that I sat in on your gig, I can't remember what the folk song I think it was, but
it's Down by the Riverside.
Down by the Riverside.
Yeah, I did a very different kind of arrangement.
I loved it.
Uh-huh.
Loved it. And then on the turnaround in the form,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what the hell what is this?
Yeah.
It's so great.
Uh-huh.
And I said I can't remember harmonically what was going on. Something with a flat sixth or something like that.
Yeah.
I said, where did you come up with this, man?
Yeah,
You're like,
and I probably said, I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't even know what that is,
Yeah,
is
well,
what you said.
I mean,
Well, you know what it is theoretically, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I got there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so funny. And it's just, maybe you're a little more intuitive as a composer or improviser or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, some of it, when I write music, a lot of it is starting with a bass line. I just kind of fool around till I come up with some unique bass line that makes some sense. And then I often will build around that, But that arrangement of Down by the Riverside came out of basically a mistake, a transposing mistake that I then listened back to, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I will go back to some of my melodic lines, and I'll see, oh, wait, I did this on that.
Right.
I took it and I left out some of the notes, and I shifted it rhythmically to the beginning of the bar or something, and maybe I did it consciously when I did it, but I don't remember doing it.
Right.
So anyway.
Okay. Frank Zappa or John Zorn?
It's a tie. Zappa, I mean, we do one of a Zappa tune on the new Serpentine album.
It can't be a tie.
It's a tie.
It's a tie.
We do Son of Mr. Green Jeans.
Okay, so you don't have a favorite?
No.
Okay, fair enough. What's your favorite music venue in the world?
I'll have to say the Old Colony Tap in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Cool.
It's a tiny dive bar. The floors are tilted. You feel like you're drunk when you just first walk in the place. The audiences are so into the music. The music is so real, so unbelievably real. I love it. Plough and Stars in Cambridge is sort of a runner-up.
Okay. Favorite city? Other than Boston or Providence?
Yeah, other than Boston or Providence? Or New York?
Or New York.
Well, you're cutting out a lot of options.
Well, there's a lot of other options.
Favorite city? I don't know. I like wherever I am at the moment.
That's fair.
Yeah.
In a hotel, would you rather have like really just horrible water pressure or really bad pillows?
Oh my God. Well, I'm a big fan of a good shower.
Oh yeah?
Big fan of a good shower. And so I'd have to say the water pressure is
a must.
Is a thing. Yeah, I mean, I like pillows, but you can always construct. You take a T-shirt, you roll it up.
Right.
So yeah, the water pressure.
Okay. I'm there with you.
Yeah.
What would be your best category on Jeopardy, other than music, of course? Like, what do you know a lot about? Like, what's your thing?
I know about, I guess, myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a category.
They don't do that? The category?
Tell us about yourself.
Ken Field?
No.
Well, that would be my best category.
Okay. So you don't have another category? I
don't know.
You're not into like,
I mean, I'm not very good with some things. I'm not very good. I'm not particularly literate. I'll say that. I'll reveal that about people. Want to know about me? If they want to know about me,
yeah, that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing this, right? So I'll just say, yeah, I'm not very literate. I read, but I'm not particularly literate.
Why is it not something?
I just don't have time. Really, yeah. I love reading, but I just don't find the time. There's always something else to do. Really.
I have a hard time retaining information when I read it. Mm-hmm. I think maybe it's some ADD shit, but I think, so that's why I also don't read that much. Yeah. Because I'm bad at it.
Yeah, well, I do love to read. When I sit down and pick up a book and I go to it, I love it. If it's something that really, I mean, I have a high bar. Right. It's the same with movies. I want to see a movie that's going to change my life in some way. Okay. I want to read a book that's going to give me some inspiration that it's going to change my life in some maybe small way, maybe big way. So I can get turned off by something when I see that it's not moving in that direction. But in general, I love to read. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read magazines and stuff. But
cool. You're a tough man to please. Okay. Here's a really uplifting one.
Uh-oh.
Would you rather be drafted or lost at sea?
Drafted or lost at sea?
Yeah.
Probably I don't know. I mean, I like to take control of my life.
Right.
So being drafted kind of is a loss of control because
Right.
you're not volunteering.
Right.
Being lost at sea, I mean, you're losing some control there too. But I guess there's a potential for being creative and
Right.
innovative and figuring out a way
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
Well, yeah, I agree with what you said. Ornette Coleman or Lee Konitz?
Konitz.
Konitz.
Yeah.
One gig with James Brown's band, like playing in the horn section,
Yes.
or quartet,
I'm already done.
or quartet with McCoy, Jimmy Garrison, Elvin, like Train's rhythm section.
Yeah. I'd have to say James Brown. Yeah.
That's my number one.
Yeah.
Like if I could play with any band ever,
Yeah.
it'd probably be getting do a tour with James Brown.
I know. Amazing.
Okay, couple more. What are your biggest vices?
I play solitaire on my phone.
Really?
Yeah.
Like gambling kind of vibes,
No,
or
no,
just
no.
passive for fun kind of
Just for
time
fun
killer
before I go to sleep,
mind melter?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other vices we need to know about?
I drink mostly Maker's Mark.
Cool.
Is that a vice? I don't know.
Probably. If you had extra time or money, what social cause would you devote yourself to?
I'd say education. An educated population, an educated society is going to make better choices, than the other way around.
Right. We won't tell them that you don't read that much, though.
Well, I think education. Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, there's a little contradiction, but I think education has to do with thinking for yourself. Not believing everything you hear, with doing a little research and understanding a little bit about how the world works, right? And I think you do that by seeing examples of people who and also practice, by understanding a little bit about how the world really works and not necessarily blindly believing things you hear or read.
Right.
Or see.
I agree.
On TV.
Hugely important.
Yeah.
One person you could have dinner with that's not music related.
Obama.
That's mine.
That's yours?
I'm a big Obama.
So you already have a reservation?
He's going to be our next guest.
Coming up.
Okay, last question. Most formative record for you when you were young?
Well, in my playing youth, in my jazz youth, I would say something else. The Cannonball Miles Coltrane sort of session that was released under Cannonball's name, but was really Miles's session. Mm-hmm. Loved that album. But early on, I listened to Procol Harum was a big thing. The first Jethro Tull album, the flute playing on that, the selection of material on that, Bach to Roland Kirk on that first Jethro Tull album. I mean, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of those groups from that time. I'm an old guy, so from the 70s, I guess the 60s, Cream, Disraeli Gears, Big Brother. I listened to all those.
Those were impactful for you.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, in terms of players, Herbie Mann, the early flute stuff, because I'm very fond of playing flute. I love playing flute. Yeah, there's a lot. It all goes in and somehow comes out, right?
Right.
In some fashion.
Makes you, which is why I'm talking to you.
And it's why we're all different, because we all have different experiences. And it's not just music that comes in. It's seeing somebody on the street, just somebody singing a song or just walking,
right.
Or whatever. Every sound that comes in, every experience you have comes out through your horn somehow.
Right.
You hope, if you let it. If you stop the wall and let it come out.
That's why my students in particular, I try to tell them, you need to live a life too.
Yeah.
It's not all about sitting in a room and practicing or...
Well, for some people it is, though. I mean, look at Charlie Parker, or Sonny Rollins. I mean, they sat in a room and practiced, all the time. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Cool. We can leave it there.
Let's leave it there. Great to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming out from our homeland.
Yeah, our homeland. My pleasure.